At 74, anticipating my golden years, a celebration meant to crown decades of dedication suddenly dissolved into a terrifying realization. The deepest treachery came from within my own home. Before we delve into this narrative, please share your location in the comments, and ensure you subscribe so you won't miss similar compelling tales. Now, let's explore this. My entire existence had been a prelude to this specific moment. I was on the verge of stepping away from the vast enterprise I had meticulously crafted. Brick by brick, across countless years of tireless effort, personal sacrifice, and unyielding commitment, this dinner was intended as a grand farewell, signaling the close of one significant chapter and the start of an entirely new one. The room buzzed with the jovial sounds of guests, their faces softly illuminated by the chandelier's gentle glow, and the atmosphere was rich with heartfelt congratulations. My daughter, Claire, beamed with evident pride, my grandchildren playfully darted about, and Derek, my son-in-law, stood nearby. He was his usual quiet self, yet his gaze held that familiar, sharp, calculating intensity. The evening felt utterly surreal. I had never envisioned that after everything, I would finally attain this reprieve. No more meetings, no more endless hours at the office, just the profound satisfaction of having truly succeeded. Yet, as I greeted friends and family at the room's heart, an unsettling sensation began to grow within me. The laughter seemed excessively loud, the music overly cheerful, as though something sinister was beginning to stir beneath the surface. I couldn't pinpoint its origin, but this feeling was undeniably real, like a heavy burden pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Then, Derek materialized by my side, offering a glass of wine. His smile was courteous, even welcoming, but I noticed his eyes lingered on me, scrutinizing, evaluating me in a way that made me deeply uneasy. "Here, Lillian," he murmured, his voice smooth. A toast to the end of an era. I accepted the glass from him, despite the moment feeling distinctly wrong, a vague sense of dread creeping up my spine. The wine, a rich, deep red, shimmered in the candlelight, appearing to hold more than mere celebration. I raised it to my lips, and as I did, I detected an odd, almost metallic aroma. I froze. The faint scent persisted, disturbing me in a way I couldn't articulate. A sharp, acrid smell that made my stomach clench. I attempted to dismiss it, persuading myself I was merely imagining things, perhaps too much bubbly. But as the conversation swirled around me, I could no longer ignore the growing discomfort. I took a small sip, feigning enjoyment, but the flavor was off too sharp, too bitter. I quickly placed the glass back on the table, my thoughts racing. Claire, seated beside me, smiled warmly, and picked up the glass without a moment's hesitation. "Thanks, Mom," she said, oblivious to my distress. She took a sip, then another, and I found myself watching her, my heart hammering in my chest. The evening continued with the same forced joviality, but my mind struggled to focus. Something felt profoundly amiss. Every laugh, every cheer, every toast seemed to echo ominously within me. I repeatedly glanced at Derek, trying to decipher his expression, but his composed face revealed nothing. It wasn't until many hours later, as the gathering was concluding, that everything changed. Claire suddenly collapsed, her body convulsing violently. Screams erupted as people rushed to her aid, but I could only stare in stunned disbelief. The world around me seemed to blur. The sound of frantic voices became muffled as my heart pounded. Claire, my vibrant, capable daughter, lay shaking uncontrollably on the floor, her eyes rolling back. Derek remained disturbingly calm. His face, typically taut with ambition, now wore an expression I couldn't quite identify. He stood slightly apart, as if observing from a distance. I rushed to Claire, attempting to steady her, my hands trembling as I cradled her head. My thoughts spiraled. How could this be unfolding? Someone called emergency services. I don't know who. All I could focus on was Claire, her face pale, her breathing shallow and irregular. The chaos surrounding me felt remote, like a dream. As we hurried to the hospital, Derek sat beside me in the car, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. I felt his presence, each breath making the air heavier. "I've witnessed this before," Derek remarked casually, his tone overly measured, too controlled. A college acquaintance had a similar reaction to something like this. It was a rare compound, a chemical, I believe. It's not unheard of. I froze. How did he possess such knowledge? The question lingered, gnawing at me, chilling my blood. A rare compound. I had never heard of such a thing. Yet Derek spoke of it with such certainty, as if he knew precisely what had transpired. I scrutinized him, my gaze piercing. He met my eyes briefly, his face showing no hint of guilt, no sign of worry. "How would you know that?" I asked, my voice trembling more than I wished to betray. Derek shrugged, his lips curving slightly. "It's just something I recall. My friend experienced a similar reaction in college. Strange things occur sometimes. But don't fret. Claire will be fine. She simply needs medical intervention." I nodded, but my thoughts raced. I couldn't prevent the idea from taking root. Was he attempting to poison me? Was this his doing? Or had Claire simply made an error and drunk from my glass by mistake? The doubt, the uncertainty, settled heavily in my chest. And as we reached the hospital, my entire body seemed to lock. As physicians hurried Claire into the emergency room, I stood in the waiting area, my hands shaking. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but my mind was consumed by a single thought, one burning question that dominated my every waking moment. Had Derek poisoned me? And had Claire merely been an innocent casualty? I didn't yet have the answer, but I was beginning to grasp that the turmoil that had begun this evening would not easily subside. It was only just commencing. The sensation of doubt, sharp, persistent, relentless, began to erode my trust, and there was no turning back. The sterile hospital scent filled my nostrils as I paced the waiting room, my thoughts a whirlwind. Claire was in a bed somewhere down the corridor, unconscious but stable. She had been stabilized enough for the doctors to confirm one detail. She had been poisoned with a rare substance. The words echoed in my head, each syllable a hammer blow to my chest. I wanted to scream, to demand explanations, but I didn't know where to start. The world felt as though it was spinning, but everything seemed to halt when Derek entered the waiting room. He appeared as composed as ever, not a single strand of his perfectly styled hair out of place. His calmness, however, was unnerving. It was far too calm for someone whose wife was in the ER fighting for her life. He glanced at me and offered a tight smile. "She'll be fine, Lillian. It's just a rare substance. I'm certain it's nothing too grave." "How do you know that?" I retorted, perhaps a little too sharply. His casual dismissal of the situation made my stomach churn. Was he truly so indifferent to what had just befallen Claire? He raised an eyebrow, his expression unchanged. As I mentioned, I knew someone in college who had a similar reaction. It's uncommon, but people do recover. The very same words he had uttered on the way to the hospital, the same rare substance, the same lack of concern. The way he spoke of it was as if he were discussing a trivial matter, not the life-threatening crisis we faced. He couldn't possibly know this unless he had been involved somehow. The question gnawed at me, twisting in my gut. Claire's physician then appeared, a kind man with a weary face, his presence momentarily pulling me from my thoughts. "Mrs. Pierce," he stated, his voice grave but steady, "we've confirmed your daughter was poisoned. It's a very uncommon substance, and the effects can be severe, but with prompt treatment, we believe she'll make a full recovery." I nodded, striving to maintain my composure, but the storm within me raged. "What is this substance?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It's hard to identify precisely, but we're conducting tests. What matters is that we got her here in time." I barely registered his words. My mind was entirely focused on Derek. How did he know about this rare substance? How did he know it would provoke such a reaction? And why had he remained so calm about it? Something simply didn't add up. As the doctor departed, I turned to Derek, my eyes narrowing. "You seem so very confident, almost too confident." He met my gaze, his eyes unwavering. "I told you, Lillian. I'm just trying to be helpful. There's no reason to jump to conclusions." I wanted to scream at him, to shake him until he confessed his involvement, but I couldn't. Claire needed me to stay calm. She needed my strength. So, I held my tongue, but internally, the suspicion that had been quietly growing was now a loud, insistent clamor. Claire, when she finally awoke a few hours later, seemed disoriented but stable. The moment her eyes fluttered open, I grasped her hand, relief washing over me. But even as I held her, I sensed a tension between us, a distance I couldn't explain. "Mom," she asked faintly, her voice weak. "What happened?" "You were poisoned," I replied, my voice trembling with the weight of the words. "Do you recall anything? What happened at the dinner?" She blinked up at me, clearly struggling to focus. "I don't remember much. I was feeling fine. And then everything went dark." Her eyes drifted past me to Derek, who had been standing silently at the room's edge, watching with an inscrutable expression. Derek approached, gently placing a hand on Claire's arm. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "I'm all right," Claire responded softly, her gaze lingering on him. I witnessed the trust in her eyes, the unquestioning belief. It sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't hold back any longer. I needed her to hear me, to comprehend that something was terribly wrong. "Claire, I need to ask you something," I began, my voice shaking with suppressed emotion. I believe Derek might have been involved in this. The way he behaved, the things he said, it's too much of a coincidence. He knew about the rare substance. "Claire, how would he know about it unless Claire cut me off?" Her voice sharp with a protective edge. "Mom, you're imagining things. Derek would never do anything like that." I froze. Her words stung more deeply than I could have imagined. Claire, my own daughter, was defending him. "But Claire," I started, my voice breaking. "No," she interrupted firmly, her gaze hardening. "I'm fine. Okay? Derek didn't do anything. You're simply overreacting." I felt the room closing in on me, suffocating me. My own daughter, the one I had protected for so many years, was looking at me as if I were the one who had lost my sanity. I had no words left. How could I articulate the unease that had settled deep within me? How could I make her see the danger? I tried to keep my voice calm, but I couldn't conceal the hurt. "Just don't mention anything I said to Derek, okay? Promise me you won't." Claire frowned but nodded. "Of course. I'm not going to bother him with this. He's already been through enough tonight." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her, to make her see what I saw, but I couldn't. She was too far gone, too blinded by her affection for Derek. And in that instant, a fissure began to form between us, one I couldn't mend, no matter how hard I tried. Derek was gaining the upper hand. I didn't understand how or why, but I felt the harsh truth creeping in. This wasn't solely about Claire's poisoning. It was about something far greater, something more sinister, and I had no idea the extent of this betrayal. I was alone in this struggle, and I was beginning to realize that my family, the very people I had spent my entire life safeguarding, might be the ones plotting against me. The burden of the betrayal was overwhelming. I couldn't breathe. How could my daughter, whom I had loved and raised, be entangled in something so dark? How could I have been so oblivious to Derek's true nature? And worse, to the fact that my own flesh and blood stood beside him, conspiring against me. I had to uncover the truth. I had to reveal every last detail, even if it meant acting covertly, even if it meant risking the destruction of everything I had built. With Claire still recovering in the hospital, I knew I had some time. But I couldn't trust anyone, not even my own relatives. Derek was too polished, too cautious. Every time I observed him, I saw the calm facade he wore, concealing a manipulative mind beneath. There was an unsettling coldness in his eyes, and no matter how much I tried to dismiss it, an insistent feeling in my gut told me I wasn't imagining things. I made a firm decision. I hired a private investigator. His name was John, and I had connected with him through a reliable acquaintance. He was discreet, effective, and most importantly, someone I could confide in with my deepest suspicions. I gave him a few clear instructions. Follow Derek, monitor his movements, and report back to me daily, hourly if necessary. I needed to know what he was doing, who he was meeting, and why. It wasn't long before John returned with troubling information. Derek had been meeting with individuals from the business world, all seemingly involved in questionable activities, dealings that didn't align with the company he was supposedly managing. But it wasn't just the business meetings that unsettled me. It was the secretive nature of everything. Derek was meeting these individuals in secluded locations, away from public scrutiny, far from any legitimate company operations. The scattered pieces of the puzzle I had tried to ignore began to coalesce in ways I hadn't anticipated. But the greatest shock came when John reported a revelation that shattered me completely. Derek had been meeting with Jennifer. Jennifer, my daughter, the one I had always trusted more than anyone, the one who had always been quiet and reserved, had been secretly associating with my son-in-law. The realization struck me like a physical blow, and I felt as if the ground had vanished beneath me. Derek wasn't just attempting to seize control of the company, he was trying to take everything from me, and Jennifer, my own daughter, was assisting him. I couldn't grasp it initially. How had I missed this? How had I failed to see the warning signs? Jennifer had always been the quiet one, content to remain in the background, never seeking attention, but now it was evident I had misjudged her. She had been playing a deceptive game, and Derek had been her accomplice all along. I reflected on how Jennifer had always looked at me, always respectful, always eager to please. Was it all just a charade? Had she harbored resentment all these years, quietly plotting her own ascent to power? Or had Derek manipulated her, just as he had me, drawing her into his web of deceit? I felt sick. Jennifer had betrayed me in a way I couldn't even comprehend, yet I had never suspected her. I had placed my trust in her. How could she do this to me? The pieces clicked into place with a chilling finality. Derek wasn't operating alone. He had been using Jennifer as a pawn in his scheme, and she had played her role flawlessly. Together, they were a formidable duo. Powerful, manipulative, and utterly willing to obliterate everything I had worked for: the company, the family, everything. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to process it all. I had no idea what to do. Confronting Jennifer directly felt impossible. How could I even look at her the same way after everything I had uncovered? And Derek, my son-in-law, whom I had welcomed into my family years ago, was now my adversary. I didn't know who I could trust anymore, but one thing I knew for certain: I wasn't going to let them win. I had dedicated too many years to building this empire, too many years sacrificing for my family, only to have it torn apart by the very people I had loved and trusted most. I wasn't going to surrender without a fight. I contacted John again. "I need more," I instructed. "I need every detail you can find on Jennifer. I need to know her every movement, where she's been, who she's been meeting. I need to understand the full extent of this." "Understood," John replied, his voice steady. "I'll start immediately." As the days passed, the tension in the house became unbearable. Claire, though recovering, still seemed distant, unaware of the impending storm. Derek maintained his pretense, acting as if nothing had changed, his calm demeanor never wavering. But inside, I was consumed by fury and disbelief. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let them seize everything from me. The investigation had only just commenced, but already the truth was proving more horrifying than I had ever imagined. Derek and Jennifer were collaborating, manipulating everything for their own benefit, and as the elements of their conspiracy began to align, I realized the betrayal ran deeper than I had feared. I wasn't just fighting for the company anymore. I was fighting for my family, for everything I had ever believed in, and I was determined not to let them prevail. I didn't know how or when, but I would find a way to reverse their plans. The storm was only just beginning, and I was prepared to face it head-on. I could no longer pretend. The truth was already surfacing, and it was only a matter of time before it fully emerged. But confronting Jennifer, my own flesh and blood, felt like an insurmountable task. She was my daughter. How had I failed to see the deceptions she had woven right before my eyes? How could someone I raised, someone I loved, betray me so profoundly? Yet, the pieces were falling into place. Derek, with his smooth words and hidden ambitions, had been deceiving me. But it wasn't just him. It was Jennifer, too. She had been involved from the outset, subtly manipulating, scheming covertly, a puppet master working with Derek in the shadows. And the worst part was that until now, I hadn't even suspected her. I knew what I had to do. I summoned Jennifer to my study, the very room where we had shared so many family moments over the years. The room now felt colder, as if the walls themselves had witnessed too many secrets to retain any warmth. My pulse quickened as she entered, her face bearing that familiar, trusting expression I had seen countless times before. But tonight, I wouldn't allow myself to be fooled. I would confront her with everything. "Jennifer, sit down," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk." Her eyebrows furrowed slightly, her eyes widening with surprise. "What's happening, Mom? You seem upset." "Don't play innocent with me," I snapped. "I know what you've been doing. The meetings with Derek, the plans to seize the company, everything. I know about the affair, Jennifer, and I know you're not just manipulating him. You're trying to manipulate me. You've been trying to tear this family apart." For a moment, she simply stared, her mouth slightly agape. Then she swallowed hard and tried to compose herself, her posture stiffening. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice trembling. "This is insane, Mom. You're overreacting." I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering. "Don't lie to me. I know about the affair. I know you're working with Derek. And I know you've been plotting behind my back. So stop pretending, Jennifer. This ends tonight." There was silence, a long, heavy silence that seemed to stretch indefinitely. Finally, Jennifer exhaled sharply and looked down at her hands. "You don't understand," she murmured. Her words, soft and weary, caught me off guard. I expected her to deny everything, to hurl more falsehoods at me, but instead, she seemed resigned. "What don't I understand?" I asked, my voice low, filled with disbelief. Jennifer lifted her eyes to meet mine, and for the first time in a long while, I saw something raw in them. Pain, anger, and regret, but also a strange clarity, as if everything she had done had led her to this exact moment. "I've always lived in Claire's shadow," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "Always the second choice. Always ignored. You always favored her. Mom. She was the perfect daughter, the perfect employee, the perfect everything. And she paused, her throat tightening. I was nothing. Just the quiet one, the one you never truly noticed, always left behind." I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly replaced by confusion. "Jennifer, I never favored Claire. I never meant to hurt you. I loved you both equally." But Jennifer shook her head, a bitter smile curving her lips. "Maybe you didn't intend to, but that's how it felt. Claire had everything. And what did I possess? Nothing. Nobody ever paid attention to me. Nobody ever cared. So I decided to act. I opened my mouth to speak, but she cut me off, her voice growing stronger, more determined. "I wasn't going to sit back any longer, Mom. I wasn't going to live in the shadow of your precious Claire. So, I met Derek, and I realized he could provide everything I desired. He was ambitious. He had connections. He had influence. And I realized that together, we could take control of everything. Your company, your life, everything you've built." I recoiled, her words like a physical strike. "You're using Derek to seize control of the company?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of fury and disbelief. "Is that all this is about? Jennifer? Power? Ambition?" She looked at me coldly, her expression hardening. "It's not just about power, Mom. It's about finally being seen, finally being the one who matters. And now I'm going to get what I deserve." My stomach churned. I had spent so many years striving to protect my family, to construct something solid, something enduring, and now my own daughter was part of a plot to dismantle it all. But what shocked me even more was the absence of remorse in her voice. There was no regret, no apology, only cold determination. "You're not just trying to take over the company, are you?" I said quietly, the realization hitting me with full force. "You're planning to eliminate me. You want to ensure Claire inherits everything, and then you'll dispose of her, too, won't you?" Jennifer didn't flinch. "You don't understand, do you? Claire is weak. She's too kind, too naive. She won't be able to handle what's coming. But I will. And when I take control, everything will be mine." I sat there stunned, my world collapsing around me. My own daughter, my flesh and blood, was plotting to destroy me, to ruin everything I had worked for. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced. I closed my eyes for a moment, attempting to steady myself. Rage burned in my chest. But there was also something else, something I hadn't anticipated. I wasn't just angry at Jennifer, I was afraid. Afraid of what she had become. Afraid of the destruction she would unleash if I didn't stop her. But one thing I knew for certain. I wasn't going to let her take everything from me. Not without a fight. I stood up slowly, my eyes locked on hers. "You won't escape this, Jennifer. I'll protect Claire, and I'll protect this company. You can't have it all." Jennifer rose as well, a mocking smile on her lips. "You can try, Mom, but I'm already ahead of you." As she turned to leave, I felt the full weight of the moment. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, had betrayed me in the most profound way possible. But I wasn't finished yet. I had a strategy. I wasn't going to let Jennifer and Derek demolish everything I had worked for. I would stop them, no matter the cost. The conversation with Jennifer lingered in my mind, gnawing at me with every passing hour. Her words, cold and calculating, had ripped through the layers of my trust, revealing the depths of her ambition. But now, I had no alternative but to act. I couldn't simply sit back and allow her to destroy everything I'd built. I had to understand the full extent of this, how far she had gone to secure her position. I shifted my focus to the company's financial records. I had always kept a meticulous eye on the figures, but now I needed to scrutinize every transaction, every report. Nothing could escape my attention. Jennifer had already demonstrated her capacity for manipulation, and I needed to ensure she hadn't been deceiving me on a much grander scale. Days merged into nights as I pored over documents, comparing financial statements, invoices, and transfer logs. My pulse quickened as I uncovered the first indications of something far more sinister than I had imagined. Buried deep within the company's accounts were numerous transfers, substantial sums of money that had been moved into unfamiliar accounts not linked to the business. It didn't take long to trace them back to Jennifer. She had been siphoning funds for months, diverting money into hidden accounts without anyone, especially Claire, knowing. The scale of it was astonishing, and it became clear Jennifer had been planning this for much longer than I had realized. Her ambitions weren't merely about the company's future. They were about securing her own wealth, her own power, and her own command. I felt ill as I continued my investigation. Jennifer had acted with such precision, such meticulousness, concealing her tracks, manipulating every financial document, every decision to ensure her share of the company expanded. The numbers were all there in plain sight, yet the betrayal still felt like a punch to my gut. The deeper I delved, the more I saw just how far Jennifer was prepared to go. It wasn't just about resentment anymore, or about feeling overlooked. It wasn't vanity or pride driving her. It was an unyielding hunger for power. She was no longer my daughter. She was a formidable adversary, and she would stop at nothing to achieve her desires. But what chilled me most was realizing how much she had already acquired. I had been so preoccupied with Derek, so consumed by his influence over Claire, that I had missed what was directly in front of me. Jennifer had been using Derek. Yes, but she was the true architect. Every moment I spent chasing shadows, trying to piece together the truth. Jennifer and Derek were advancing towards their objective. The company was at risk, and so was Claire. I knew I had to act swiftly, but the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on me. Every move I made, Every step I took had to be carefully calculated. Jennifer and Derek had been operating clandestinely, pulling strings, working with precision. I couldn't afford to make a single error. The stakes were higher than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just about stopping them anymore. It was about protecting the family I had left. And the deeper I examined Jennifer's secret dealings, the more I realized that the battle I was fighting wasn't just for the company, it was for my family's very future. I had to be astute. I had to outmaneuver them at their own scheme. The truth was finally becoming clear. Every detail, every hidden maneuver Jennifer had made, was now apparent to me. What I had initially dismissed as mere ambition had evolved into something far more sinister. She wasn't just aiming for a larger portion of the company, she wanted it all. She had devised a plan to eliminate not only me but Claire as well. I sat in the quiet of my study, the documents spread before me. I reviewed the evidence once more, its weight pressing on my chest. Jennifer hadn't merely been after the company. She had been playing a long game, and I had been oblivious. Derek, I understood, was nothing more than a pawn in her strategy. He had been utilized, manipulated into believing he was part of the grand design. He was a mere instrument, nothing more. But Jennifer, she was the mastermind behind everything. She had meticulously orchestrated her moves, positioning herself to assume control while eliminating any threats in her path. First me, then Claire. I found it difficult to breathe as I connected all the dots. The money transfers, the clandestine meetings with Derek, the gatherings with individuals who had no connection to the company, the clandestine relationships, the falsehoods. It was all part of her elaborate plan. She had exploited every angle to secure her place at the pinnacle, all while pretending to be the devoted daughter, the quiet one who could never harm a soul. But now I saw it for what it truly was. Jennifer wasn't just angry or resentful. She wasn't simply trying to carve out her own space in the world. She was desperate for power, and she was willing to destroy anyone who obstructed her path. The company was merely a means to an end. I was the obstacle, and Claire was next. I leaned back in my chair, my head reeling with the implications of my discovery. How had it come to this? How had my own flesh and blood, the daughter I had loved and nurtured, transformed into this ruthless, cold individual? I reflected on all the moments we had shared, all the times I had tried to be there for her, to guide her, and I couldn't reconcile the girl I had raised with the woman she had become. Anger surged within me, but it was quickly overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of despair. I had trusted Jennifer. I had believed in her. How could she have betrayed me in such a manner? I ran a hand through my hair, attempting to compose myself. This wasn't solely about me anymore. This was about Claire. The company had always been my legacy. But Claire, she was my heart. I had fought my entire life to protect her, to give her everything I never had, and now it was all jeopardized. Jennifer wasn't just after my company. She was after Claire, too. I stood up abruptly, pacing the room. The storm was intensifying, and I had no choice but to confront it directly. I couldn't allow Jennifer to succeed. I couldn't let her dismantle everything I had built, especially not for her own avarice. But the thought of confronting her, of confronting my own daughter, made my stomach twist. I had believed she would be the one to carry on my legacy, the one to take over the company when I retired. But now it was clear she didn't want to carry it forward. She wanted to own it, and everyone else be damned. I knew what I had to do. I had to stop her. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed to confront Jennifer and Derek, expose their deceptions, and ensure Claire was safe. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. Jennifer had already demonstrated her willingness to do whatever it took to get what she wanted. She was relentless, and I couldn't underestimate her. With all the pieces in place, I began to formulate my strategy. The first step was clear. I needed to confront Jennifer. I needed to show her that I knew what she was doing, to let her know that I was no longer the naive mother she could manipulate. But as the reality of what I was about to do sank in, I felt a strange mix of emotions. My anger was strong, yes, but it was tempered with something I couldn't quite define, an aching sorrow, a deep, unshakable sadness. This wasn't merely a battle for the company anymore. It was a fight for my family, And as much as I hated to admit it, I didn't know if I could prevail. I had never imagined that my own offspring would become the very ones I had to contend with. But now, as I surveyed the path ahead, I knew there was no other option. I had to protect Claire. I had to protect everything I had worked for. And if it meant fighting against my own daughter, then so be it. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. This was it. The confrontation was imminent. And it would be more challenging than anything I had ever faced. But I would face it, regardless of the cost. The time had come to stop Jennifer, and I wasn't going to let her win. As I continued to unravel the intricate web of lies Jennifer had woven around me, another startling realization struck me. The game had grown more intricate, and my youngest son, Ethan, was now a participant, a mere pawn in Jennifer's scheme. I had always believed Ethan to be the most loyal of my children, the one who preferred his own company, avoided corporate conflicts, and focused on his personal life. But now, observing him closely, I saw how effortlessly he had been drawn into Jennifer's machinations. It began subtly. Ethan, who had always maintained a distance from the family enterprise, started appearing more frequently at gatherings, offering opinions on matters he had previously shown no interest in. Initially, I thought it was just a phase. Perhaps he was finally developing an interest. But as time progressed, it became clear that Jennifer was behind it. She had been feeding him promises, manipulating him with words that appealed to his desire for recognition, for power. She had convinced him that if he helped her seize control of the company, he would be handsomely rewarded. His own stake, a portion of the inheritance, a seat at the table where he could finally feel significant. The thought of Ethan, my son, being ensnared in Jennifer's web of deceit was almost unbearable. He had always seemed to possess the least ambition, the least desire for power. How could he fall for this? How could he allow Jennifer to twist his loyalty, turn him against me, against everything I had built? As I watched Ethan from afar, I could discern the gradual transformation within him. The boy who had once sought my guidance now seemed distant, detached, like a stranger who no longer trusted me. Jennifer's promises of power and wealth were clouding his judgment, and the more I observed, the more I realized how deeply he had become entwined in her plans. I felt betrayed, not just by Jennifer, but by Ethan too. How could he be so blind to the destruction his actions would cause? Didn't he understand what was at stake? Didn't he grasp that Jennifer's plan wasn't about preserving the family business? It was about her own selfish avarice, her desire to dominate, to control everything. The anger simmered within me, but I fought to keep it in check. The last thing I wanted was to alienate Ethan further, but I knew I couldn't allow him to continue down this path. I couldn't let Jennifer use him as another instrument to achieve her goals. I began to plan meticulously. The delicate balance between confronting him and shielding him from Jennifer's influence was more precarious than ever. I couldn't afford to completely estrange him, but I also couldn't permit him to remain her pawn any longer. So, I decided to adopt a different strategy. I would leverage the one thing Jennifer had underestimated: Ethan's deeply rooted loyalty to the family. To me. I began to provide Ethan with small fragments of information, disguised as casual conversations, snippets of concerns about the company and its future. Slowly, I allowed him to perceive the flaws in Jennifer's scheme. I didn't force anything upon him. I simply gave him the opportunity to see it for himself, to question his involvement, to understand that Jennifer wasn't who she appeared to be. But even as I started planting the seeds of doubt, I knew I had to be cautious. Jennifer had already proven her willingness to go to any lengths to manipulate her way to the top. And I couldn't underestimate her influence over Ethan. He was vulnerable, caught between the allure of power and his deep-seated desire to belong, to be recognized as important within the family he had always felt distant from. The tension between us intensified. Ethan became more reserved with each passing day. But I knew it wasn't solely because of the company. It was because he felt conflicted. Jennifer's words were still fresh in his mind, but the quiet pull of family allegiance was beginning to stir his conscience. I spent sleepless nights questioning myself. Had I failed him? Had I raised him to be weak? Easily swayed? The guilt gnawed at me. But the reality was stark. I had to stop Jennifer. even if it meant confronting my own son. The stakes were too high. If I didn't act, Jennifer and Ethan might succeed in taking everything from me, the company, my legacy, my family. But it wasn't just about business. It was about trust, about the fractured bond between mother and child. I had never imagined that I would be in a position where I had to fight against my own children. But the betrayal cut so deep that I couldn't ignore it any longer. Jennifer's manipulation of Ethan was the final piece of the puzzle I needed to see clearly. I had no choice now. I would have to confront both of them. I would have to expose Jennifer's plan before it was too late, and I would have to pull Ethan back from the precipice. But as I prepared for the inevitable confrontation, a profound sense of dread filled me. I knew that whatever transpired next, it would alter everything. The path I was traversing was dangerous, and I wasn't sure I could protect the family I had worked so diligently to build without losing everything in the process. I had awaited this moment far longer than I ever thought I would. The truth, the entire unpleasant truth, was finally ready to be unveiled, and I couldn't hold back any longer. I possessed the evidence, the financial records, the concealed accounts, the secrets Jennifer had labored so hard to bury. It was time to confront her, to expose everything she had done, to take charge of the chaos she had created. I arranged to meet her in a secluded location, away from prying eyes, knowing that if I let her off the hook now, I would regret it for the remainder of my life. The weight of betrayal was heavy in my chest, but there was no retreat. When I saw her standing there, her face as calm and composed as ever, a flicker of doubt almost made me hesitate. But I couldn't. I had spent too much time assembling all the pieces to allow her to manipulate me once more. She was my daughter, yes, but she had crossed a boundary I could never forgive. "Jennifer," I stated, my voice steady despite the storm raging within me. "We need to talk. It's time you acknowledge your actions." Her eyes narrowed, but she remained silent. Instead, she folded her arms, a calm smile playing at the corners of her lips, as if she already knew what was coming. She had always been a master of control, but this time, it wouldn't work. "I've seen everything, Jennifer," I continued, laying the papers on the table between us. "The money transfers, the secret accounts, the way you've been siphoning funds from the company. You thought I wouldn't notice, but I did, and I know about you and Derek." At the mention of Derek's name, her composure faltered for a brief second, but she quickly regained her calm, her gaze cold and calculating. "I don't know what you think you know, but I haven't done anything wrong," she declared, her voice icy. I leaned forward, my gaze never leaving hers. "Don't lie to me. I know about the affair, Jennifer. I know you've been using him, using everything around you to get what you desire. You've been planning to take over the company. You've been planning to eliminate me and Claire. That's the truth, isn't it?" She remained silent for a moment, her eyes darting to the papers in front of her before she let out a soft laugh, devoid of humor. "You think I'm the villain here? You think I'm the one who's in the wrong?" Her voice rose slightly, sharp, filled with an unexpected venom. "Yes," I said firmly. "Because that's precisely what you've become. A villain in your own family. You've been plotting behind my back, manipulating everyone, including Derek, and now you're willing to destroy everything I've built just to get your hands on it." For the first time in our entire conversation, Jennifer seemed to let her guard down. She straightened up, her eyes burning with a mixture of anger and something darker resentment, perhaps even hatred. "You never truly understood me, did you, Mom?" she asked, her voice cold, but tinged with bitterness. "You and Claire? You've always had everything. The love, the attention, the respect. I've spent my entire life in your shadows, never seen for who I truly am. You never gave me the room I needed to be my own person, to be acknowledged. And all of this, everything I've done, it's because of you. It's because I needed to prove that I matter." The words cut through me more deeply than I had expected. The raw emotion in her voice, her hurt, her anger felt like a slap. But I had to remain strong. I had to see this through. "You think I've never acknowledged you?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly, though I fought to maintain control. I've always loved you, Jennifer. But this isn't about love. This is about power. You're willing to destroy your own family just to feel important. I'm not going to let you do that. Jennifer's gaze hardened. You never understood me. You only saw what you wanted to see. You never gave me the opportunity to prove myself. You always prioritized Claire. Always gave her the company. Always treated her like she was the only one who counted. The bitterness in her voice caught me by surprise. But it was her next words that truly shocked me. And Derek. He wasn't just a tool, he was a solution. He was my chance to obtain everything I deserved. I used him, yes, but he used me too. I never desired him, Mom. I never needed him. I just needed someone to help me get what I wanted. Her admission hung in the air, thick with tension. For a moment, Derek's role in all of this seemed less significant. Jennifer had never cared for him. He had been nothing more than a means to an end, and in that instant, I realized just how far she was willing to go to achieve her desires. There was no remorse, no guilt, just a cold, calculating hunger for control. I heard a sound behind me. I turned to see Derek standing in the doorway, his face pale, his expression one of shock. I didn't know she was planning this. I thought we were in this together. But Jennifer merely shot him a glance, her eyes narrowing. You're too weak for this, Derek, she stated dismissively. You were never truly part of the plan. You were just an instrument. Derek stood there stunned, his face crumbling as he comprehended the truth. For all the manipulation, for all the power games Jennifer had played, he had been as much a pawn as anyone else. I never intended to harm anyone, Derek said quietly, almost to himself, before turning and walking away. It was too late, however. His attempt to distance himself was meaningless now. The damage had been done. I turned back to Jennifer, my resolve solidifying. This ends now, Jennifer. You're out of the company. You're out of this family. Her eyes flared with anger, but there was nothing she could do. I possessed the evidence. I had the upper hand. The time for manipulation was over. I'm not going anywhere, Jennifer spat, her voice venomous. I'm not asking, I replied coldly. You've lost, and now you'll face the repercussions. With that, I turned and walked away from her, the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. The power had shifted back into my hands, but as I exited the room, the full weight of everything struck me. The family I had built, the trust I had given, had been irrevocably shattered. But in the end, I had triumphed. The company was mine and Claire's. Jennifer was gone, but at what cost? I didn't yet have the answers. But one thing was certain. The conflict wasn't over, and nothing, not even family, would ever be the same again. The battle was far from concluded. But the initial step had been taken. With Jennifer and Derek removed from the company, I finally felt a sense of control returning to my life. It wasn't the victory I had envisioned. It was far more complex than that, but it was a triumph nonetheless. Jennifer was gone. Derek, too. Their ambitions and manipulations no longer held sway over my enterprise, but the price had been steep. I convened an emergency meeting with the board of directors. It was time to act decisively, to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I had to reassure the shareholders that the company would remain robust, that their investments were secure, and that everything I had built would endure. I couldn't allow the instability caused by Jennifer's plotting to destroy years of hard work. The meeting was tense. I could feel the board members' eyes on me as I entered the room, each one awaiting my words, some semblance of assurance. They knew what had transpired. They knew the family drama had spilled into the business, but they needed leadership. They needed confidence. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, I began, my voice steady despite the internal turmoil. I won't waste your time. We've experienced a betrayal within the company. Jennifer Pierce and Derek have been dismissed from their positions. I now assume full control of the business. As of today, Claire will step into a leadership role, supported by me. I observed a few heads nod. Some appeared relieved, others uncertain, but they all understood what needed to be done, and they knew I was the one to accomplish it. From this moment forward, Jennifer and Derek will have no influence on the company, I continued. I'm restructuring our operations. We're enhancing our security, both financially and strategically. We will ensure that no one will be able to undermine us again. The room was silent, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about me asserting control, it was about ensuring the survival of everything I had worked for, everything I had built for Claire. I knew that my actions, though necessary, would leave lasting marks on Claire, on the company, on my family. But they were scars that had to exist if I was to protect us all. Claire, standing by my side, was more composed than I had ever witnessed her. The girl who had once been so shielded, so cautious, had transformed. She was strong now. She had no alternative but to be. Her eyes met mine, and I saw not just the daughter I had raised, but the leader she was becoming. "You're ready," I murmured to her, just loud enough for her to hear. She nodded, her jaw set with determination. "I'm ready. We were in this together." The company would not only survive, it would flourish. But there was more work ahead. I wasn't just safeguarding the business. I had to protect Claire's future. Jennifer had done everything in her power to destroy us, and I couldn't allow her efforts to continue from the shadows. The company's reorganization would guarantee that no one, especially Jennifer or Derek, could ever gain access to what they believed they could control. As the meeting concluded, I felt the first sense of relief in days. The path was clearly defined before me. Claire was now in charge, but I was still the one guiding the direction. I would mentor her, shield her, and ensure the company would remain strong under her leadership. But despite the progress, some questions remained unanswered. Ethan, he had been the unpredictable factor in all of this. Initially, I had hoped that his involvement in Jennifer's plot was merely a passing phase, but now, observing his behavior from a distance, I realized he was withdrawing from everything he had once believed in. Jennifer's influence over him was dissipating. He had started to perceive her for what she truly was, the manipulative, power-hungry individual she had always been. But it wasn't that simple. He still felt conflicted, torn between his allegiance to her and his own guilt over his role in her schemes. I watched him quietly, maintaining my distance, unsure of what to say. The betrayal stung, but I knew I had to give him space. He needed time to process everything, to see that the life he had been drawn into was nothing like the one he had hoped for. I knew I couldn't protect Claire and the company without making difficult decisions. I had been ruthless, yes, but it was essential. The family business, our legacy, was more important than my personal feelings or my past shortcomings as a mother. I had to maintain tight control, because if I relaxed my grip, there would be nothing left to preserve. Despite the pressure, despite the doubts gnawing at me, I knew one thing: the survival of this empire was my responsibility, and as long as I drew breath, I would protect it, no matter the cost. The control was back in my hands, but it had come at a great price. I couldn't allow myself to waver. Not now, not when everything was at stake. I had to be strong for Claire, for Ethan, for the company, and for the family that had torn itself apart. But I also knew deep down that no matter what happened next, the trust within this family, the foundation that had held us all together for so long, was broken. And that, more than anything, was the hardest truth to accept. I had accomplished it. Jennifer and Derek were finally out of the picture, removed from the company, stripped of their authority, and cast aside like the traitors they had proven to be. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel the surge of victory, but the taste of triumph was bitter, even sour. It was a hollow victory, one that came at the expense of everything I had ever known, everything I had once believed. The company was beginning to regain its form under Claire's leadership. She was steady, self-assured, and despite everything, stronger than I ever could have wished. She was ready. But as much as I admired her strength, the scars of the past few months lingered between us. There were wounds that couldn't be healed simply by a change in leadership. Jennifer and Derek had been more than just business associates. They had been family. But now they were nothing. Their betrayal had cost them everything: their positions, their influence, their place at the table. And most devastating of all, They had forfeited their standing in our family. I had to make the most difficult decision of all, severing ties completely. The moment I signed those documents, officially ending their connection to the company, I felt a burden lift, but it was also as though a part of me had been torn away. I hadn't just lost them as business partners, I had lost them as family. With that decision, I had also been forced to let go of Jennifer in a way I never thought possible. The daughter I had raised, the child I had loved and trusted, had chosen power above all else. And the cost was too high for me to disregard. It wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. And yet, despite the anger, despite the betrayal, I knew that severing ties was necessary for Claire's sake, for the company, and for my own peace of mind. As I prepared to move forward, to rebuild and restore what had been damaged, a profound sense of sorrow filled me. I wasn't just grieving the loss of Jennifer as a business associate or even as my daughter. I was mourning the relationship we once shared, a relationship built on trust and affection, now shattered beyond repair. But I couldn't afford to remain trapped in that pain. Claire was relying on me to be her strength, and the company was relying on me to navigate it through this storm. I couldn't falter. The sacrifices I had made, the battles I had fought, had all led to this moment, but the weight of it all felt crushing. And then there was Ethan, my son. The one I had hoped would bridge the old and new. The one who would help restore the family, but even he had been drawn into Jennifer's twisted web. It was difficult to watch him still wavering on the brink, caught between Jennifer's manipulation and the reality of what was unfolding around him. For a while, it seemed like Ethan was drifting further and further from the family. The guilt I felt about his involvement in this mess, about how I had failed him in some respects, gnawed at me. But there was a shift. I started to notice him pulling back from Jennifer's influence. The fog was beginning to clear for him, and slowly he began to understand what I had done to protect us all. I could see him struggling, torn between his loyalty to Jennifer and his growing realization of the damage she had caused. I hadn't given up on him, not yet, but I knew that I couldn't compel him to see things my way. He had to arrive at that conclusion independently. As I watched Ethan begin to distance himself from Jennifer, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't too late for him to rejoin the family, to find his place once more. But that hope was tempered by the knowledge that things would never be precisely the same. Jennifer's manipulation had left scars on all of us, scars that would take time to heal, if they ever could. I dedicated myself fully to rebuilding the company, focusing on Claire's leadership, ensuring she was equipped to assume full control without looking back. But every step I took, every decision I made, felt burdened by the aftermath of betrayal. Jennifer and Derek were gone, but their actions still haunted me. Their treachery had shaken me to my core, and no matter how much I tried to advance, I couldn't escape the lingering pain. There were still challenges ahead. Restructuring the company, ensuring the family's legacy remained intact, all while managing the fallout from the betrayals. But the hardest part of all was the emotional toll, the hurt, the broken trust. It was all still raw. I knew it would take time to rebuild not just the company, but the relationships within the family. The family I had fought so hard to protect now felt like a distant memory. I had fought so fiercely for Claire, for the company, that I hadn't realized how much it had cost me. Jennifer's betrayal had shattered the very essence of what I believed family should be. And the hardest part was knowing that even as I took command, even as I began to rebuild, the damage had been done. The trust was gone, and though I had emerged victorious, the cost was far greater than I had anticipated. I would protect Claire, I would protect the company, but I couldn't alter the past, and that truth was something I would carry with me forever. The downfall of Jennifer and Derek marked the conclusion of one chapter and the commencement of another, but it was one I would have to navigate carefully, one step at a time. And so, as I stood by Claire's side, guiding her, shaping the company's future, I knew that my work was far from complete. But the one certainty was that the struggle had cost me more than I could have ever imagined, and that no matter what came next, the scars of betrayal would remain with me, lingering just beneath the surface. The transition had proceeded more smoothly than I had expected. Claire had stepped into the CEO role with a quiet yet unyielding confidence, as though she had been preparing for this her entire life. I watched her lead, making decisions with a clarity and composure I could never have anticipated from her in her younger years. She wasn't the same girl I had once sheltered. She was becoming the leader I had always hoped she would be. As for me, I knew my moment had arrived. My involvement with the company had been my identity for so long, but now, with Claire at the helm, it was time for me to withdraw. I couldn't remain in the shadow of my own creation. I had to release my grip. But stepping away didn't mean vanishing. My role as matriarch, as the guiding force behind everything we had built, would never truly depart from me. I would remain as a trusted advisor, a symbolic figure, but I would no longer bear the daily responsibilities, the constant burden of decision-making. Initially, I felt a sense of relief, as if a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Claire was capable, more than capable. She possessed the strategic mind, the vision to propel the company forward, and most importantly, she had the inner drive I had always hoped would define her leadership. But as the days passed, a growing melancholy began to creep in. I found myself observing her from the sidelines, watching her shoulder the responsibilities I had once carried with such determination. And though I was proud, a small part of me ached. It was the same ache I had felt when I realized I had to remove Jennifer from the family. That sensation of losing something precious. Now I was watching my daughter step into the position that had been mine for decades. And with it, I felt the passing of an era. I had always known that someday this moment would arrive, but knowing it was inevitable didn't make it any easier. I had poured my heart and soul into constructing this empire, and now it was time for Claire to guide it to places I could never have envisioned. And yet, as much as I knew this was her time, as much as I yearned to see her succeed, the transition left me with a lingering sadness, a feeling that something had been irrevocably lost. My place in the company, my role in the family, had changed. I was still the mother, still the matriarch, but I wasn't the one making the decisions anymore. I wasn't the one steering the future. I couldn't help but think of Jennifer. Even as I felt proud of Claire, I couldn't escape the lingering shadow of what had occurred. The betrayal, the manipulations, those scars would never completely heal. The relationship I had once shared with Jennifer was gone, irreparably broken. And though Claire and I had emerged from the storm stronger, the trust I had once placed in both of my children had been forever altered. Ethan, in particular, weighed heavily on my mind. He had endured so much, caught between loyalty to Jennifer and the painful reality of what had transpired. I could see him attempting to rebuild his life, trying to find his footing again. But there was no denying that he too had been affected by the turmoil. His position within the family would never be the same. He had once been the son I could rely on, the one who avoided conflict. But now, the distance between us was palpable. He was adrift in his own way, uncertain of where he fit into the new reality I had forged. I knew that it wasn't just the company that required rebuilding. It was our family. Claire was becoming the leader I had hoped for, but Ethan was still wandering. I could see the pain in his eyes, the guilt he carried for his involvement in the manipulation. But I also saw the regret, the dawning realization that Jennifer's promises had been hollow. The boy who once trusted in the family had been led astray by the wrong person, and now he had to find his way back to us. There were moments, quiet moments, late at night, when I would find myself contemplating the price of everything that had happened. Yes, I had fought for the company, for the legacy. I had protected Claire, even when the cost was high. But the cost had been higher than I had ever anticipated. I had lost Jennifer, lost Ethan's trust, lost the family dynamic that had been so steadfast for so many years. And as I sat in my office, watching Claire work, making the decisions I once made, I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. Yes, the company was safe. Yes, Claire was leading with strength. But the price I paid for this safety, this triumph, was steep. The family I had fought so hard to protect was no longer the same. The trust that had once been a cornerstone of our bond had been shattered. I had won, yes, but I had also lost. And so, I braced myself for this new chapter in my life. I would continue to guide Claire, continue to be there for Ethan when he was ready. But I couldn't escape the knowledge that the dynamics had changed permanently. The scars of betrayal would never entirely fade, and the relationships I once thought were unbreakable had been tested in ways I could never have foreseen. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The family I had known and loved would never be the same again. And as much as I tried to embrace this new reality, a part of me would always mourn the loss of what we had once been. This was the new chapter, and I wasn't sure yet if it would be one of redemption or of quiet sorrow. But I knew it was mine to write. Just as Claire was now writing hers, the final chapter of this long, arduous journey had arrived. As I sat in the quiet of my office, the burden of the past few years weighed heavily on me. Everything I had fought for the company, the family was still standing, but the cost had been immense. The foundation I had built with such effort had been tested in ways I couldn't have imagined, and the scars were still raw. The betrayals, the deceptions, the shattered trust, it all lingered like an inescapable shadow. But in the stillness, there was also a sense of accomplishment. I had protected the empire I had spent decades constructing. I had fended off the threats. I had confronted my own children, and I had emerged victorious. I had ensured that Claire, my daughter, would carry the legacy forward. Claire was ready. I saw it now more clearly than ever. She had matured not just in her capacity to lead, but in her understanding of the responsibility that accompanied the role. She was taking charge of the company, and it was clear to me that she possessed the strength to navigate the treacherous waters I had spent so many years in. She was prepared to face the impending challenges, even if those challenges would mirror the ones I had encountered. The fight against avarice, ambition, and the hunger for power would never cease. I had demonstrated that to her, and I knew she would be ready to stand firm. Still, as I watched her assume more responsibility, a sense of loss settled in my heart. Yes, Claire was stepping into the role I had held for so long, but there was an unspoken grief in witnessing her take the reins. I had spent my entire life carving out a space for myself, and for the first time, I was stepping aside. In her hands, the company was secure. My legacy was in capable hands, but the personal cost, the relationships that had been fractured would never be the same. I had witnessed Claire's growth, seen her strength, but I also knew the weight that now rested on her shoulders. It was more than just managing the company. It was holding together a family that had been torn apart by betrayal and manipulation. I had done everything I could to protect her. But the truth was clear. She would have to fight her own battles now, just as I had faced my own demons. She would have to confront the same forces, greed, ambition, and the very powers that had nearly destroyed us all. And that thought brought me a strange comfort. I had been a warrior in my own right, fighting for everything that mattered to me, and now Claire would take up that mantle. I had done my part. I had protected her. And now, it was her turn to safeguard the legacy we had built. As I prepared to fully step away, to entrust the day-to-day decisions to Claire, I reflected on everything that had led me to this point. There was no denying the sacrifices I had made, the moments lost with my children, the relationships damaged beyond repair. But there was also no denying the strength I had discovered within myself, within Claire, and within the company I had built. I had fought for the future, even when it seemed like the past was slipping through my fingers. And now, as I watched Claire take charge, I knew I had done what needed to be done. I had equipped her with the tools to succeed, and I had ensured that the company would thrive under her leadership. But as I looked back on the years of struggle, the betrayals, and the deceptions, there was still a deep ache in my heart. The damage had been inflicted. Jennifer was lost to me, and while Ethan was slowly finding his way back, things would never be the same. The family I had once known, the family I had fought to protect, had been irrevocably altered. And yet, despite the pain, I knew this was my legacy. Not just the empire I had constructed, but the lessons I had imparted, the strength I had passed on to Claire. The sacrifices, the betrayals, the heartache, they had all culminated in this moment, and in that, there was peace. Claire had proven herself, and I knew she would continue the mission I had initiated. The company would flourish, but the cost of keeping it intact would always linger in the background. The scars from Jennifer and Derek's betrayal would never fully heal, and the relationship with my children would never be what it once was. But the legacy, the strength of what we had built together, would carry on. As I walked out of the office for the final time, I looked back at the place I had spent so many years building, shaping, fighting for, and though it was time for me to step away, I knew that the fire that had burned inside me all these years had been transferred. Claire would carry it now. She would carry it for both of us. And as I moved forward into this new chapter, I knew I could never erase the past. But I also knew that the future was in capable hands, and with that, I found the peace I had been seeking. My legacy was secure, and that was enough. My story's conclusion had arrived. But Claire's was just beginning. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your own story in the comments. Your perspective matters.